Starting Live, where we plant financial seeds every week so you can grow in our 6 areas of focus. Emotions and money, entrepreneurship, budgeting, banking, debt fundamentals, and investing. I'm your host, Tasha Danielle. Let's dig in. Hi everyone, welcome to Financial Garden Live. I'm your host, Tasha Danielle, and I'm so happy, and grateful to have a special guest on today, Laura Watson. Not only because she is a fellow CPA like me, but I just love her personal journey. And she truly is an expert in the field. She has years of experience in public accounting, working in a regional firm and working at a startup company, and really knowing like ground level how to process this and everything that you would need to know being a financial professional in a startup company. And what I really like about Laura is her transparency and money mindset and manifestation. She even manifests her dream home, right?
Yep. Yeah. I'm trying to make my own little studio today.
I know, but that's really one of the things I really enjoy about you, because I think a lot of people think about CPAs, they think stiff and stuffy, but Laura had, besides her manifestation and money mindset, she went on a life-changing trip to Tanzania, and the outcome was her becoming an entrepreneur and really going strong with her company, the Numbers Nomad, where she empowers financial professionals to provide clarity to their clients, and where she also advises small business owners to get comfortable with their numbers. And why she is perfect to talk about today's topic on what's your end game in developing growth mindset. So welcome, Laura.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited. I've been watching these, so it feels maybe I manifested sitting in this chair too.
Maybe
your video.
No, thank you so much for coming on. And I like that you put the human touch to CPAs and numbers. So, and that shows through on your Instagram, and it's just very genuine. So I'm happy to have you on.
Yeah, that's super important for me to always be super. I don't know any other way to do it, if I'm being completely honest. So, but I want to empower other financial professionals, entrepreneurs to do the same thing in their business and whatever that means for them. So.
Okay, so we are on Financial Gardeners YouTube and Facebook. So if you're watching on either one of those, make sure you're sharing, commenting, and tagging entrepreneurs as you're watching this. But Laura, so I talked about Tanzania and that life-changing experience, and then that led to you becoming an entrepreneur. Well, a little bit of that and wanting a work-life balance. So tell us about Tanzania and how the Numbers Nomad came to be.
Started? Yeah, sure. So this was back in February, and he was my fiance at the time. We eloped in Tanzania. That's another story. So you can go look at that on my Instagram. That's what she's referring to. But I had a lot of aha moments, which you would guess would happen if you go somewhere like Tanzania, right? You don't go to those countries and not have some sort of life-changing experience. And so I learned a lot there. And I came back right during tax season and was very stressed out, and had come back from eloping and meeting all sorts of people, and how simply everyone lived there and how joyful everyone was. Like, I don't know that work-life balance is even a term used in Tanzania, because there's culturally, they really strive for, togetherness, community, a lot of like spirit and happiness, and from what I saw. And so when I got back, I was like, this cannot be my end game, honestly, was being working in corporate. And while I learned so much and grown with the company in processes and employees and all of those things, I came back and I said, I have to change. Something has to change. And I kept changing my circumstance, my job, or what I was doing, but not really my mindset, and really focusing on what does the next 10 years look like for me. What do I want to do here with my life? And so I had been dabbling in the bookkeeping business realm and kind of helping other entrepreneurs. I live on a small island in the Pacific Northwest, north of Seattle. I can see a Canadian island, pretty much out of my doorstep here. So I'm very far north and very remote. And so when COVID hit, that's kind of when my business took off, because there's not a lot of CPAs and accountants in my community. And so all of this stuff with the SBA and the PPP loans, I started doing some research and just decided to go for it. And so that's when I did my very first live stream, got my very first clients officially, and started the Numbers Nomad. The idea came to me, like, I think I was in the shower. I was like, what would my name be? What really encompasses my traveling and doing things a little bit differently, right, and authentically, while also paying homage to my CPA and numbers and growing businesses and all that. And so came back and I started that pretty much, I think it was in March when I got back, and it's evolved into lots of things. And so as you've seen, kind of my way of doing things and my honesty about maybe the financial professional industry and how I want to help entrepreneurs has also led me onto a path of helping accounting professionals and coaching them so that they can sort of find their zone of genius too, and get that same sort of mindset advisory training that I do with my small business clients. So,
well, no, I love that story. I've heard so many stories about online companies taking off during COVID. You hear a lot
mm-hmm.
of the downside of COVID, which I feel like I hope goes away very soon. But
Mm-hmm.
you were able to grow your business, and then also, I mean, you just have the background. I think I was in
Yeah.
public accounting. You learn so much so fast, and then going to a startup, like all that shapes you to be able to really just jump right into it,
Yes.
and be effective. So I reached out to you because you help business owners with their mindset, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's talked about enough, because the entrepreneur journey is tough. It's not all highs you get. It's peaks and valleys, right?
Yes. Yep.
So, how do you help clients have a growth mindset and kind of get on that path?
Yes. So I think especially when you're first starting your business, there's sort of, you have your purpose, right? And you're very excited. And then reality hits and you're like, I have to do what? Like, I have to do all these things. And it's really overwhelming. And so a lot of people bootstrap and do different things, and they tend to get overwhelmed and forget the whole reason why they were doing it in the first place, or like we're going to talk about, not having that end game. So when I come in and help people, it's usually after they've been in business maybe a year or 2 years, and they started to forget why they're here, and they came to a conclusion like they needed a bookkeeper, and they get more than that, right? The trusted advisor role. But the growth mindset comes in as understanding what's a fixed versus a growth mindset. So fixed being one that I have been in, especially in a startup, where you're kind of trying to like grab things and hold on to them, and you're saying, nope, this is the way I'm supposed to do it because I'm scared, right? And that
Mhm.
scarcity, the world has that kind of hold on a lot of things right now. And so it's really crucial for business owners to understand what a growth mindset is for them. And that is understanding what their end game is. So when I started my business, I was so clouded by all of the fixed mindset mentality that I had held on to, whether it was from that I learned in public accounting or in college, and kind of those traits that I had of everything is scarce, there's not enough to go around. And I realized that I had to let go of that in order to grow my business. And so those are the similar conversations that I have with my clients is you started this for a reason and there is more than enough for you to be here. And how can you do it differently? And like, what did you set out to do in the first place? And so it's not so much me telling them what to do, it's asking questions so that they start to think about, wait, this was why I did it. This was the whole reason I have some on this island, why I moved to the islands and I got out of my corporate job and I took the leap. But they get bogged down by the norms that are kind of put on them or the dotting the I's and crossing the T's, right?
Yeah, the day to day.
The day to day. And so, for coming from a CPA as someone they really trust and as someone who they're expecting to maybe be a little more rigid, right? Getting that kind of advice and advisory has turned into a lot of questions of, well, what else can you help me with? And so I offer a DIY where some of those younger entrepreneurs, they do their books and their bookkeeping, and I kind of teach them and help guide them through. And then I am coming in at the end of the quarter and kind of checking on things and making sure that everything's cleaned up and having, I call it an empowerment report review, where we look at their business and look at certain KPIs and different goals and things. But I also offer a session where we just talk about mindset. So we get back to the whys and we have the ability to dive into those things. And it's the same thing that I do with my peers, other CPAs, other bookkeepers, because ultimately we're all kind of on this entrepreneurial journey and a lot of us are exactly the same. The fears we have are exactly the same. And so
No, I agree. I agree that the fears of entrepreneurs are always the same. Is it's going to be, how long is this going to last? Is my team going to still be here? Can they execute everything? I got this to do, that to do. When you, like you said, you usually like year one after going through a full year is when some of where most clients come to you after going through it. And I think I did a live a few weeks back about trusting your vision and like remembering your purpose. And a lot of that, why I started talking about that was because of the day to day. You kind of forget why you're doing what you do. So with Financial Garden, I really wanted to make an impact in my community, and I was just jumped into it. Started going into schools, teaching financial literacy, but then it was like, okay, how do I grow, and how do I do X, Y, and Z? How do I hire staff? And still working a 9 to 5, but really trying to figure out how do I delegate, right? And one of the things that started to happen was everybody has an idea about what I should do with financial gardening, but a lot of those ideas were just money chasers, and it wasn't true to my mission. And my what my values, my value statements are with financial gardening. So financial gardening has grown, which is why we're doing a live right now from not just teaching kids about money, but to adults and to educators. And that really came from what I seen in the classroom, educators taking notes, them needing to be financially have financial wellness as well, and then they want to teach their students outside of me being there. So that's how that grew. And then adults with the parents, the stuff that their kids were learning, they were coming home and teaching them. So it grew very naturally, like to the other lanes, right? But people are like, oh, you should do this, and all the suggestions were, yeah, it can make me a lot of money, but that's not that wasn't the purpose of the mission of Financial Garden, right? And my 9 to 5, my whole goal was I'm going to climb the corporate ladder, not really thinking about value or purpose. But you get to that point, and I know you shared in your Instagram of like, what is the value in this? I didn't see the value in public accounting. I'm working 90 hours a week. People who don't want to be bothered with me, right? And you kind of just you're just going through the motions. And I didn't want financial garden to turn into that where it's just chasing dollars and not really trying to
Mm-hmm.
make sure you're making an impact, which is what I set out to do. So it's a little different being a social entrepreneur. I know some people who have other businesses, they're not all about social impact or whatever, but financial garden is to me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel you wholeheartedly where you can get as an entrepreneur lost for your mission when you're doing bookkeeping. That comes naturally to me in accounting where that may not come to a boutique owner, right? Then the marketing. It's like marketing is just not that's not my thing. There's so many different hats you have to wear that you just don't even think of when you're just starting out. Because when you're first starting off, you have that one focus, that one passion. So once
Mm-hmm.
you get people back to thinking about why they started and getting back there, and you start talking about mindset and that growth, like do you have any examples on I know you mentioned KPIs, but just like a story on helping a client get to that growth mindset who were just all over the place, getting away from their mission? Like how did you guide that business owner to a growth mindset?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have a client. They're a winery actually, but they don't do the standard kind of wines, and they moved from Southern California. They had a young son, and they decided they wanted to do something completely different, and they had never made wine before. So this was just, they were already way outside their comfort zone, and
Wow.
they're good dear friends now. But I could tell, I was there a couple weeks ago discussing some things, and they were thinking about the harvest for this year, and they're just, you could tell that they kind of, their light had dimmed a little bit, like reality had set in. And so I don't take my job as like doomsday. Here's me, that's going to cost a lot of money. Be scared. It's like, okay. I was like, well, what's the end game here? You know, you're nervous about this harvest, but are you trying to distribute your wine? Are you trying to grow your tasting room? Are you trying to be known like nationwide? Like, what's the goal here? Because that should really be driving your harvest and what you're trying to do. And so, having that goal in mind, they were like, oh, I don't know. I can't actually answer it. They got so stuck on oh, I just have to make wine. And it was like, okay, well, what are we trying to just distribute the wine? Are we trying to just bring people into the island and into your tasting room? And so having those very simple questions where they just go, instead of going, micro, they go meta. Oh, right. This was why I did it. And even though I did it for their example, get away from our 9 to 5s and try something new and challenge ourselves, like they still they still have an end game. They still want it to become something. And so I think now having them realize that and start to think about, okay, we're successful. Where are we going with this? Where are we headed? That's an important question for me as an advisor to be asking them, right?
Yeah. And so I'm gonna be honest, like I didn't think about like my end game for financial garden as a company until I read the book Soar.
Mm-hmm.
My business coach actually, Dorothea Kelly,
Mm-hmm.
she's awesome. But they were passing Soar around, like they passed it from one entrepreneur to the next entrepreneur. So it was like the gift that kept on giving. If you wanted to highlight different things in there, you could for the next person to pick it up. So she gifted it to me. And I was like, I'm like sore. Like I knew what it was about, and I was just like, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'll take a look at it. But once I picked it up, I couldn't put it down. And the reason why is because TD Jakes was talking about what's your end game? Are you gonna sell your business? He gave facts about family owned businesses, how you pass it to the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, it may do well, but by the time the fourth generation could be gone, you can point to the exceptions like the Ford Motor Company and stuff like that, which is public now, but the wall ends. Like there are some exceptions to the rule, but overall, when you think about passing on to the next generation, it doesn't always happen, right? And I'm like, wow. When I started Financial Garden, it was just I wanted to teach kids about money. Still had a 9 to 5, so it wasn't like I needed. I was trying to bring in like hit a cash cow or hit. It was just like I just really want to have change. And a lot of people are like, why don't you make this a nonprofit? I'm like, no, I didn't want anything holding me up. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Start the LLC, go in the classrooms, go. And I'm like, wow, what is my end game? Like, what do I want to do? Like, I had ideas from my business plan and like where I wanted to grow it, but I never really thought about like, do you want to get to the point where you sell it? Like, what would that look like? How would you want your company to be valued to say how much you should sell it for? Like, how are you truly going to get to the national level? I'm locally in Detroit in classrooms, but it was like, how do you scale up? And I remember at a conference, like one of my first conferences that I went to where I got my first client. Well, no, not first client because I had a clients before then, but like the first client that wasn't word of mouth, where I actually was pitching, just pitching all day. And another entrepreneur came over and he's like, this is great, but how are you going to scale it? Like, do you have I'm like, don't ask me that. Like, I'm just happy to be here. I have it in my business plan. But like right now, it was just like I needed to know that I could do that. I'm an introvert. Me pitching all day for 8 hours is a huge win in itself for me, right? But that's that with me, and I'm like, okay. Eventually, I knew I had to hire people, and I knew the way to get there because I do that in my 9 to 5. But when it's like near and dear to you, you can really lose sight of that. So that helped me figure out like what's my end game, like where do I want to go with this, what are my revenue targets overall, like what would position me against my competitors to sell it off, like or turn it into something else, like how can you pivot from Financial Garden. um so I just want to share that with people, like always think about your end game, which you help and you advise on. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs lose sight of that, like why did you start it, right? And where do you ultimately want to go with it? I do have a comment. Somebody, Robbie. I got in the school systems, cold calling. That's how I got in there, and I was a math tutor for a few years. My mom works in the education system, so I did know people. So I just made calls and volunteered. And you have to build up that reputation. So it made it easier because I was a PPA and I had experience as an educator, like a non-traditional educator. So I had all the qualifications and I volunteered to get testimonials, so get pictures with kids. So I wasn't just jumping completely out the gate, like, let me charge. It was like, let me see if I can do this. And I think that slow roll into entrepreneurship is why I never really originally thought about an end game. It was a passion project originally. So hopefully that answers your question. But anyway, back to you and the winery company in that part of it. Like I want to go back to what you said about DIY. So what do you offer for business owners who can't afford advisory services? What are some things that they can get from the Numbers Nomad?
Yeah, so for those folks, I offer, like I said, it's called DIY the books. And so I truly believe in empowerment for people to know their numbers. That was one of my very first copyright when it was just a bookkeeping advisory firm, and I've pivoted a little bit, but the empowerment is so key because I got so sick of walking into places and being like, well, I don't know anything about it. That's your job. And it's like, well, yes, it is my job, but my clients do not feel that way. I don't attract those type of clients. I attract the type of clients that actually are wanting someone to empower them and give them license to do those things and understand their numbers and understand a little bit about, QuickBooks Online, for example, or the Zero, and knowing that everything's fixable too. Knowing that and stepping in there and saying like, hey, pull out of the weeds here. Like, this is not, life or death. This is accounting. Yeah. We're going to be fine. And so I just don't love that messaging. And I always didn't like, as an auditor, going into places and telling them how to do their job, right? Because I wasn't there all the time. That was really hard for me personally. I'm pretty candid about my experience in auditing. But were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna agree, and I have so much on that because, well, you said like you don't have those type of clients that don't that oh you know the numbers, you just you go you figure it out. Just having that value and knowing what you can attract, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
people are like, oh, you should do small business taxes. You should pretty much do something similar to what you're doing as well. And it's like, I don't have the bandwidth to do it. And I do it for people who really see the value in it and they really want to
Mm-hmm.
understand and grow their business. I don't want to work with entrepreneurs or small business owners who are like, the numbers. I don't
Mm-hmm.
just tell me. It's like, no, you need to take this is part of being an entrepreneur. You have to know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, how are you growing? Right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know how much money you have that you can go to hire another staff or how you can invest back into the company to start another product line, another service line? If you don't have those numbers, you're not going to know that. So for me, I could never do that with a business owner who doesn't want the advisory side of it that comes along with it because it's just not me. But it goes back to attracting those type of clients and those type of people that you want to work with. In public accounting, you don't have a say so. You get the clients that you get, and that's it. And as you're tuning in, make sure you're tagging entrepreneurs. If you have any questions for Laura, please be sure to drop them in. We're talking about knowing your numbers and your end game as an entrepreneur. So this is Laura works with entrepreneurs all the time to think about forecasting growth, and also she has DIY projects. So if you're like, I can't afford to hire a CPA, she has services where she can look over the numbers that you were working on. But I just think that's just so important, and knowing your value and having that value. Because in public accounting, I just felt like I was a pest. I'm telling someone how they think I'm looking for mistakes. I'm looking at something that happened last quarter, not something that's happening next quarter.
Living in the past.
Right. And so it was just like, I hated it. And I'm working 90 hours a week, right? And that's one thing too that entrepreneurs don't realize is that you're going to put in a lot of work in the beginning, right? You may get to easy street eventually where you're not as hands on. But a lot of times in the beginning, you are grinding, you're buying another job, right? So, but it's different when it's your business and you see the value in it, but then they get to burnout where they're coming to you like, help me, right? So I don't know a tangent there, but I do like the fact that you offer other services besides one-on-one because I know a lot of business owners just can't afford it a lot of times. And so you mentioned QuickBooks. I often mention QuickBooks too. It's like hook up your business checking account to QuickBooks and go through and identify what's revenue and expenses or whatever. If you do it wrong, they could work with you, just have that second set of eyes, right, to advise on something to consider. But that's better than doing nothing. And then
Right.
at the end of the year and say, hey, you're a CPA, you're a bookkeeper, can you just do this for me? Can you just let me know how it happens? It's like, no. I'm not doing that.
I've seen those too, and that's where all the mistakes happen, right? Because they're like, oh, wait, I didn't take a distribution that was that big, and because things get miscoded and they're not, part of it is they're not engaged in that process. So it's
Right.
an important thing.
Yeah, like you really want someone that knows your industry. And if they don't know the industry, you want to work with a person or a business that wants to know your industry, that is benchmarking to truly know you and your business. Like Laura was talking, she just mentioned that working with a client that was getting into the wine industry. You know what I mean? Like that's not that's not a business that you hear people starting every day, right? But you were invested in getting to know what their end game was, and so that way you can help better advise them. So that's just something to look for. That's a general question that I get is like, what do I look for in a CPA or working with a financial professional, like someone who is in your industry. If they're not, they're really dedicated to understanding your mission, the mission of your business, and helping it grow.
And a big deal for that, I think, is if you are in a search and you're getting on what they'd call discovery calls or getting to know people, think about the questions that they're asking you. Instead of like, how many transactions do you have a year? And it's, some of those like semantics type things, it's really who you want to work with is like, are they asking you the important question that actually gets you from that fixed place into the growth phase? And are they going to be asking you the right questions along the way? And you're going to get a taste of that on the calls that you
Yeah.
have with them.
No, that's a really good point. So if you have questions about that, make sure you're dropping them in. If you're watching and you're an entrepreneur, tag other entrepreneurs that you know need to hear this. Share, show us some love in the comment section. That's always important. But what I know you have a DIY, but what are some of the reasons people are not comfortable with your numbers when you're helping them break down that mindset on, I don't know it. That's just not my forte. Like, how do you get people comfortable with their numbers and not comfortable, but actually feel empowered about their numbers?
Mm-hmm. I think it's just having a different messaging and having a true conversation about it. I mean, I've had a couple clients that I've worked with, and they wanted to know all the practical things, right? Like, how do I apply for a PPP, or what, how do I get these things? How do I get these loans or whatever? And they just want to get there and do it. And I'm always like, whoa, like scale back a little bit. Why do you feel like you absolutely need that right now? What can we do right now in this moment to focus on, say, a product line that is selling like crazy, and how can we do more of that and maybe scale back on everything else? That was one of my big conversations when COVID first started happening, was kind of generating our focus rather than being like in this scarcity mentality of like, I have to get all the money and I have to take it all and I have to cut everything because I'm so scared. And while there's certain, I guess, positives to doing that, right, and cutting your expenses, I have no problem with that. It's the franticness and that energy, which is not good, and it has no place in your business. And so when I take clients from a place of feeling frantic and scared into more of a growth mindset, saying like, okay, like, you have things that are working. How do we do more of that? How did you know it's working? Do you have any way to pull metrics? That kind of thing. How do we pivot slightly and go online more? I have a client that had a brick and mortar store and they obviously had to close. So she pivoted and started doing more corporate gifting and gift boxes and, care packages for COVID time and that kind of stuff. It's like, if you're not focused on the bigger picture and saying, how can I serve right now and what has been working, it's really hard to feel confident about looking at your numbers. And that's how numbers are able to be more attractive to, say, someone that is not a numbers person, is putting it into their language and saying, okay, well, if we do X amount of these at this cost, this is what that number looks like. And then we put the numbers into very simple speak for them rather than being like frantic about it. So.
Yeah, breaking it down for them so they can really breaking the numbers down in a way that it makes sense to them. Like I like how you just said, assigning a number to, if I sold some of this, or I reached this goal, what this can mean for my business. And I think that is so important. Like I said, I've been like saying it so much in the last few weeks of if you don't know your numbers and you don't get comfortable with your numbers, you're not going to be able to scale and grow. And then not only just for that, just for tax purposes, you don't want to find out at the end of the year you definitely should have been paying quarterly taxes, tax payments.
That's a big one.
Yeah, you don't know how you're going to pay the tax bill, and now you're like scrambling in November, like, oh my God, let me find everything under the sun to buy because I didn't realize how much revenue I was bringing in, which is good, right?
Yeah.
That's great, but then you're not knowing your numbers is why you're in this state of frantic panic. And also too, what you mentioned about the PPP, that's something else. People like friends are like, did you apply? Did you do this? All this money is available. And I'm just like, right now, no. Like I still work 9 to 5. I do all my employees they're contract employees. So it's just like right now, that's not something that's it for me.
Mhm.
I will get there when I get there, whatever if it's for me. But there's businesses that really do need it. They really do have full-time employees that really do need it. And it's great if I could get a low interest paying loan or whatever, but it's just like it's not gonna go away, right? Like
Mhm.
having that scarcity mindset. It went away and they opened it back up again. Um, so yeah.
And it's not a one size fits all either. There's a lot of situations where it just didn't make sense for some folks to take it, and it made complete sense for others. But if you're doing it from a place of, I have to get this money now because I don't know what's going to happen, as a financial advisor, it's my job to stay calm and to help you work through it rather than feeling that franticness, right?
Yes. Because
So
it could be
that's
contagious.
my job.
So one of the other things I wanted to know with your business blowing up during COVID, what has been one of your biggest success stories?
So I would say for at least clients, I've had from a small business perspective, you know, being able to, I think the winery client specifically, they like 3x'd their from being closed to now being, worried about their stock of wine because they've almost sold out of it, right? Which
Wow.
is not my doing, but I'm still empowering them to say, like, they say, well, I think we need to up production and we're going to even up it more. And I'm saying, yeah, you can do it. Like,
Yeah.
and they're and that also is because they are well versed in their numbers and they are in them and doing them all the time rather than saying, like, can I get my financial statements and we're not going to review them together? Um, so they're a great example of a COVID success story, and their business model, they were able to do, because it is a winery, they're able to have a bunch of outdoor space. And so people can social distance safely and enjoy and not feel, crammed in a space. And so they've been able to pivot and do certain things and so they're a great success story for my business, but it really goes up to them and me just empowering them, giving them, helping them have the information to do what they need to do. So,
No, that's a great success story, especially in such a short amount of time,
mm-hmm.
as well. Okay, so I want to shift gears to your personal story. I want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about manifestation because
Okay.
I feel like that's a buzzword, and I kind of just want to go there. I know I don't. Yeah, we have time to go there. It's a buzzword. What buzzwords lately? But I honestly didn't really think about manifestation or law of attraction until I started listening to Jess Lively's
Mm-hmm.
podcast. I really just love her perspective and her take on it, and just hearing her journey and story, right? And for you, you manifested your house. So can you just share with viewers how you ended up doing that? Like,
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons why I like love her story. She's not
Oh,
just about the numbers. So I just want you to share that.
yes. Yeah. So the house, it was pretty magical, but my husband and I we were friends before, and I had been looking. So the past 3 years, I'd been looking for a house and just didn't find it. We finally started dating. We're looking for houses, and everything kept falling through. But we were very clear on what we wanted. And we finally created this list of 5 things. And if we found the house that had the 5 things on it, and one of them was like, they're very random. Like if it had a water view, because we live on an island, but not everything is a water view. If it had one, it needed to be like under this kind of price point, or no, if it was over a price point, we wanted at least a peekaboo view, which we have here, which is nice. Just different things that we knew we wanted. And so by writing them down, which we didn't really do much manifestation work at the time, we always were thinking about it, right? And so every place we went to, we always came back to that list, which can be the same for your business or your life goals too, is having those things, those core objectives. I wrote a manifesto for my company, and so I go back to it all the time. Having that list is super important for manifesting law of attraction. So we found this house the day before we found out we had to move out of our rental, which there's no rentals really on our island, so that could cause a lot of scarcity and fear. We found out.
I want to interrupt you because you guys like literally had a month's notice. It was like end of May, and it was like you had to be gone by June 30th. Like,
yes. Yeah, and we were like, what? We have to move? So, and it's summer, it's busy here, it's a tourist town. And so we're like, uh-oh. And it was actually my coach I talked to because I was freaking out a little bit, and my husband, and my coach was like, I'm not worried about it, Laura. You two are so good about manifesting and creating the life that you want for yourselves. You will manifest a house. And so I was like, okay. And my husband said the same thing. He was like, I'm going to take this as the time when we are going to find a house. And I was like, okay, yes, I will be also in that energy, and I will believe that we will find a house. And so this house we had found out about but hadn't seen yet. And long story short, we came into the house. We called the owner, who happened to be from a similar town that my husband was from in Minnesota, and she lived in Hawaii. And she just said, I love your energy. This is great or whatever. And she's like, make me an offer. Whatever that is. And we're like, what? An offer? And we never met her or anything.
wow.
Just make me an offer. And we both were kind of like, ooh, because at least in our county, we can see the assessed value of a home, and generally it sells for a lot more. And so we were like, there's no way. It's way over our budget. And my husband got a little confident one night and decided to call her 2 days later. And he was like, I'm going to make this happen. I was like, okay. And so he called her and he threw out a number below the tax assessed value.
Wow.
And she was like, she countered at the exact amount we were approved for.
Wow.
So like, I bought the house, and I was like, what? And so we didn't have a realtor. So that saved us both a lot of money and time and everything. And she let us move in a whole month before it closed because we had several things happen. And she was just like, nope, this is your house and it's supposed to be yours. And that was that. So it finally closed a little over a month ago, and we've been in it for a couple months, and it feels like a huge weight. And I kept thinking, my accountant brain, like, but that was the exact amount we were approved for. That's like, more than I wanted to spend. Right. And so, but I have done a lot of money mindset work, and I was like, you know what? If this was supposed to be our house, it ticked all of the boxes. It was meant for me. It was meant for me. It was meant for my husband. And we kept having things happen that, like, my husband's father passed away, and the plant that he always grew was like hiding in the garden. And he went there in the garden and was kind of raking and clearing, and he found that exact plant, which I guess is not a common plant in this, area. Just weird stuff like that, where it just kept solidifying that this was our home, and we just held it very steadfast even through the sales process when we thought a few times maybe it wasn't going to go through, but it was meant to be ours. And so I'm very confident and grateful for having this home, and we're, now we're in the getting it all set up phase. So
Congratulations on getting your dream home. That was, you didn't even have a realtor for. Like, when things are aligned, they are aligned. And you and your husband are really doing the manifestation. Well, he was on the manifestation work, I think you said originally.
Yeah, he definitely carried the torch on that one, because my between being an accountant and being a little nervous about finding a home and everything, he was the one that helped. But
No, where can people find you? Where can people find you and hear more about money mindset, manifestation?
yes, so I hang out mostly on Instagram. That's where we met together, and then that's my website. Yeah, for that. That's super sweet. This is my first time being on a StreamYard, so this is awesome.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the numbersnomad.com. And so if you want to inquire about DIY services, there's I think, work with me tab on there, and you can fill out a little questionnaire about certain things and then schedule a call with me, discovery call. But mostly on Instagram at the numbers nomad. I riff on lots of different things that I always feel like are only applicable to accountants, but I keep hearing from lots of people that it's very overarching. So that's amazing that my reach is getting farther than I ever thought it would. So
That's because you are attracting that number one into like people love transparent people. They love transparency and they can pick.
Mhm.
So that's why the reach is going even further. So everyone, you see this website on the screen. She has discovery calls and again, coaching, advisory services, but also DIY if you're just not you haven't manifested enough to be able to work with her one on one. But also, before we go, I know I have your website up, and I'm going to keep it up till we close out. But what is some money mindset tools or resources that people can look up on? I know you share a lot on Instagram, but what are some resources people can do to change their money mindset?
Yeah. So as a money mindset was not something that I had ever heard about until just earlier this year. I was like, what is this money? I'm a CPA. How do I not know about money mindset? But it clicked with me really well. And the first thing that I would say is if you are actually, it doesn't even matter if you've been doing it, you should always be evaluating maybe the negative thoughts you have about money. So there's not enough to go around, or money doesn't grow on trees. What's another one I hear? Money is like making good money. You have to work super hard at it. It's hard to make money. Having those thoughts and then thinking back on where did those come from, that was super powerful. So all of our thoughts come from when we are young. So for me, I always was taught, well, you have to work really hard to make money, and also making money is bad. Like it can be seen as a bad thing because we see a lot of greedy people making money. And so you can do a lot of money mindset work on your own and just thinking back, what do I think about money? What if I became a millionaire or multimillionaire, 7-figure entrepreneur? What feelings does that bring up for me? Because I know for myself, before doing this work, it was a lot of shame almost, or like that's not possible, or I'd have to work too hard to even be able to get to that place. And so having even just a journal to be able to write out some of those things of like, what do I think about money is super important. And there's a lot of money mindset, coaches online. I mean, you search Instagram, there's so many, but or the hashtag Amanda Francis is a big one. I love Allison Bird. I don't know if you know Allison Bird, but she's my favorite. And it's BYRD. And I'll send that to you actually, because I think you would like her. But having those people to also, if you're in a mindset of like scarcity or you're feeling not good about money, which happens to everyone, I have periods where I am like, oh, those thoughts creep in because we're really used to having them, right? We've been having them our whole life. So to transition that is not always it's not a switch. So having those resources, whether it's an audio, a podcast, being able to brain dump and journal, are some of the most powerful things I think you can do for having a good money mindset and accepting and visiting, reconciling with some of those ideas that you have about money and changing that narrative that you have. So
No, I recommend people use the names you recommended, because if you you follow them, they must be good. And I would just say for me, the Just Lively show, her podcast, I haven't listened to it in quite some time, but she, former Michigander, she ended up traveling the world, uncoupled like from her husband, and just her story is
I'll check her out.
inspiring. Yeah. But I also want to just remind everyone before we go, the mission 10K with Amina is still going strong. So we're talking about money mindset. And if you have children, you should be talking about money with them and not saying things such as money doesn't grow on trees and things like that. And so Amina's bracelet is a great story because it shows your children how to reach a financial goal without that scarcity mindset of saving. I only earn this much and I can only do this. It really walks through how a little girl started her business to reach a financial goal. So it's a kidpreneur story, and you can head over to financialgarden.com to get you a copy for yourself, because you can like the story too, or for a child in your life. And we are trying to reach 10,000 kids before the end of the year. December 31st, 2020 is our goal, to reach 10,000 kids to have this book in their hand and to truly be financially empowered. So make sure you go to financialgarden.com. And thank you again, Laura, for joining me on Financial Garden.
You're welcome. You know I love everything you do. So I think financial literacy is like one of the best things that we can do in this world. So
Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
bye.